On this episode, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. 19-year-old Samantha Mina suddenly developed a debilitating condition that pushed her to the brink of death within just a matter of months.
Knew my daughter was in trouble.
When I did force myself to eat an entire meal, I would projectile vomit. Nobody knew what was happening to my body.
Then, Kathy McFadden's seemingly ordinary life turns into a living nightmare when no doctor can explain the terrifying series of symptoms which plague her for more than 10 years.
She was just skin and bones. I remember saying, "Our mother is dying."
We look at the doctors for what they can't. If diagnosis is a mystery.
As a young girl growing up in Reston, Virginia, Samantha Mina enjoyed an especially close relationship with her mother, Samia.
Samantha is the best thing that ever happened in my life.
My mom was always super supportive of me. Anything I wanted to do, she definitely believed in me, said go for it.
Their relationship grew even stronger when they found themselves on their own in the fall of 2000.
I was 12 years old when my parents divorced.
It was a very difficult time. She's the one who used to take care of me, encourage me. Samantha was an adult before her time.
Definitely after my parents divorced, my mom and I became best friends and started telling each other everything.
As an Egyptian immigrant, Samia believed firmly in the American dream and always encouraged Samantha to do her best.
Samantha was always an A+ student. A is not good enough.
I do consider myself an overachiever. I've always been very driven, definitely had to be the absolute best at everything I attempted.
In school, Samantha was a dynamo. She consistently brought home top grades and was active in sports, despite her small build.
Samantha was always tiny since she was a little girl.
I definitely have a small frame, bird bones, my mom calls it. I was thin, but I was also healthy. I would do everything all my friends did. I was involved in cheerleading. I got into archery when I was in high school. I really enjoyed running. I was one of those students who tried to do everything.
And when Samantha graduates from high school in the spring of 2006, she can't wait to start her freshman year at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
Samantha was very excited to go to college. She wanted to be a professor.
My life was definitely going all according to plan. I took my studies very seriously. I would study every night for hours.
Samantha's very driven, and if it means staying up till 2 a.m. to finish an assignment, she'll do that.
As the end of the spring term approaches, Samantha and Alex celebrate at a local restaurant. She has no idea how radically her life is about to change.
We went to a fancy gourmet pizza place, and I had a big slice of pizza, and I remember about 3 bites in, I felt a stabbing in the upper left quadrant of my belly.
And I thought maybe it was gas. She said, no, it's different.
It was very, very intense.
Within a few hours, the agonizing pain subsides, and Samantha thinks little of it. But over the next 4 days, the debilitating cramps return again and again.
Every time I would eat or drink anything, I would get this stabbing pain. I wanted to scream. The only thing that could make this pain diminish or go away was to not eat. I began to think that something is seriously wrong. So I went to the doctor. I described my symptoms, and I told him I feel like my stomach is being twisted every time I eat, and he said, well, most likely you have irritable bowel syndrome.
Irritable bowel syndrome is a common disorder of the large intestine, characterized by cramping, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Its cause is unknown.
The doctor said that the only way to handle it is to just simply try to avoid the foods that set you off. And he said all you have to do is figure out which foods cause so much pain and just avoid those foods. And, I thought, that's a possibility. That might be the case. That's when I decided that I would not even attempt fatty foods, junk food, sugar.
I thought if she just ate the right things, then she would be fine and she wouldn't have any more problems.
So I put myself on a very bland diet. I would eat plain bread, crackers, boiled vegetables, boiled chicken. But I found that even the bland foods would cause pain. This sharp, stabbing pain at my upper left belly. It was like a knife, a hot knife, stabbing me over and over in the same spot. It was just so painful.
Then, to make matters worse, just a week after visiting the doctor, a frightening new symptom begins to emerge.
We went on a shopping trip and she ate some of the food that we had at the mall. She went to the restroom and when she came back out, she told me that she had thrown up.
I thought that it could be food poisoning or a stomach bug, and it would pass.
But over the next 5 days, Samantha doesn't feel any better and soon finds that eating more than 3 bites of anything makes her throw up.
I learned to decrease my portions, and so, if I would eat just a handful, I would feel a tiny bit in my throat come back up. And when I did force myself to eat an entire meal, I would projectile vomit.
And along with the vomiting, the stomach pains seemed to be reaching a whole new level of intensity.
I think it was torturing her. She got to a point where she didn't want to eat.
I became afraid of food because food always inevitably equaled pain. I grew to hate meal times. I would have this empty feeling inside of me, this lack of energy, being drained. You need to eat. But I knew if I ate, I would be in pain.
By the end of the semester, Samantha, who normally weighs 100 pounds, is painfully thin.
I was around 87 pounds. This was very alarming, so I called my mom.
It was very worrying, very disturbing. So I stopped at work. I told them, I'm not coming today. I'm going to get my daughter.
2 hours later, Samia walks into her daughter's room and is shocked by what she sees.
When Samantha changed, I saw her arms and her legs. I can see the detail of the bones. She had black under her eyes, and her face got very pointy, and it scared me. I could not believe myself what I have seen and what was going on with her. I knew my daughter was in trouble, and there was no time to waste.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
In the spring of 1996, 50-year-old Kathy McFadden was on top of the world. She and her husband Bernard were thoroughly enjoying life in their hometown of Wilmington, Delaware.
Bernard and I, we were married 26 years. We did a lot of different things together. We lived very close to a park and took a lot of walks.
Kathy was just the most vivacious, fun-loving, wonderful mother of our children.
With their 2 daughters grown and out of the house, Kathy is able to focus on her students.
I was a guidance counselor. I really did enjoy my job.
My mom liked working with families and seeing a change, seeing the difference in the kid.
But her greatest passion is biking.
We would try to bike every weekend.
We would do 30, 40, 50, 60 miles a day. It was something that we really enjoyed, really relished.
But that fall, after finishing her usual route, Kathy notices an unusual pain in her leg.
My ankles were really swollen. You couldn't tell I really had ankles. It just looked like one big leg. That evening, when I went to bed, they were still swollen. I really disregarded it. I thought, by tomorrow morning, it should be fine.
And when Kathy wakes up, her ankles are back to normal, and she and Bernard set off on their bikes. But just 20 minutes into the ride, the pain and swelling returned.
My legs were aching. The pain reminded me of a toothache that isn't like a sharp pain. It's more of a dull pain. So I tried to keep pedaling through it.
I was very concerned because she had never had anything like that before.
So I knew that there was more than just a little problem. I didn't understand this at all. I realized it was time to go to the doctor. I went to my primary care physician, and she had referred me to a vascular surgeon. He felt my ankles, he felt my legs, and he said that probably that this was due to venous insufficiency.
Venous insufficiency is a common condition in which blood collects due to faulty valves in the veins and then leaks out into the tissue of the affected area.
The swelling was due to the blood pooling around my ankles, and that's what was causing the ache in my legs.
The doctor recommends that Kathy wear compression stockings to help promote the blood flow in her legs, but it only helps up to a point.
When I had to spend a lot of time on my feet, my legs would just ache when I got home. It just got really frustrating when they still hurt.
The doctors told her that this was just a natural part of aging. We had plenty of friends our own age that weren't having these kinds of problems as a natural part of aging.
There weren't any other doctors recommended for me to see. And even though I didn't feel like it was adequate, I didn't know where else to turn.
Resigned to her fate, Kathy does the best she can to simply deal with the constant pain and swelling over the next 3 years. But then, when she least expects it, a strange new symptom begins to emerge in the fall of 2001.
One morning after a shower, I noticed I had a rash on my leg. There was an intense itching. I thought maybe it was some sort of an allergic reaction.
But it's not long before the bizarre rash takes on a life of its own.
I would get these blisters, bigger than quarters, all over the tops of my feet. And the blisters behind my knees was the worst because it really incapacitated me. Whenever I would bend my leg, then that would crack and pus would ooze out.
Her legs would seep. Her legs would get very, very swollen. She would be in such pain and discomfort that she could just barely walk. I was shocked by how quickly she was falling apart.
I realized that I was sicker than I thought I was. What was wrong with my body?
If diagnosis is a mystery.
Over the past month, 19-year-old Samantha Mina has been unable to eat more than a handful of food without experiencing severe pain and vomiting. Her doctor is confident that irritable bowel syndrome is triggering the symptoms, which can be managed by simply changing her diet. But when Samantha's weight plummets to 87 pounds, she's sure something else is going on and makes an emergency appointment with a specialist.
I saw a gastroenterologist. She gave me an exam, pressed on my stomach in a lot of places. The doctor weighed me and told me that I had what she described as the typical profile of an anorexic, which is young, female, perfectionist. Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder in which someone deliberately does not eat for the purpose of getting thinner. She told me that I wanted to starve myself. I was just shocked that she would jump to that conclusion immediately when my stomach pains and vomiting were so real, so terrible. I just couldn't believe it. It just made me so mad.
I knew that it was not anorexia. There was something physically wrong with her.
Desperate for an explanation, Samantha sets up appointments with every kind of specialist she can think of.
I went to see a cardiologist, I went to see a rheumatologist. I went to see a hematologist. I must have seen over a dozen doctors and taken as many tests. I was scanned, prodded, poked, x-rayed, just one thing after the other, and they hadn't found anything. Besides telling me that I was underweight, nobody had any answers for me at all, and that was very frightening.
By October, Samantha weighs a shocking 72 pounds, and her health is rapidly deteriorating.
Sometimes I would just get dizzy and tired. Walking back to my room, I would take rests on the curb, put my backpack down, sit down, put my head between my legs sometimes because I'd just be so tired from walking. My illness made me feel just isolated from the world. It was just me and my pain, and nobody would believe that it was there. One November afternoon after class, I wanted to catch the bus to shorten my walk back to my dorm. And the bus started to leave without me, and instinctively I started to jog after it, hoping the driver would see me so she would pull over. And then I felt like my throat was closing, my chest was tightening. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Next thing I knew, somebody had called for an ambulance. Everything happened so fast, I didn't know what to feel. I was just basically trying not to panic. When the ambulance came, they put me on a stretcher and lifted me into the ambulance. I was taken to the hospital, to the ER, and there they checked my heart rate. I was given an EKG. The doctor said that my heart was weakened by my weight loss. He said the heart is a muscle, and just like you've lost most of the other muscle in your body, you've probably lost some of your heart muscle because you are so underweight. So now your heart has to work very hard, pumping really fast in order to provide enough blood and oxygen. He said that according to the World Health Organization, I was below the starvation point. And that was a very frightening thought. I was hitting rock bottom.
I was very scared for Samantha. It was very scary. I was scared she was gonna die.
It was really frustrating and frightening because nobody knew what was happening to my body. I was reaching the end of my rope, so I was thinking I have to take matters into my own hands.
Samantha throws herself into researching her symptoms, and just 3 days later, she's onto something.
I noticed with all the tests that were being done that they were all focusing on my stomach or my large intestines. So I started thinking, what about everything in between? So I did some research and I read about an upper GI series and how that got good images of the entire stomach, small intestines, and large intestines.
Convinced this may be the key to understanding her condition, Samantha requests an upper gastrointestinal series with radiologist Dr. Ziad Haddad.
I first came into contact with Samantha on January 18th, 2008. Her body was telling her that something was wrong, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it. I was quite surprised with the severity of her symptoms.
That afternoon, Samantha undergoes the test.
So an upper GI series is a study performed by a radiologist where we use continuous x-rays called fluoroscopy. It's a way of looking at the upper digestive tract.
The patient drinks barium, a contrast solution that allows the radiologist to watch in real time as the mixture travels through the digestive tract.
During the test, he said, I see a problem. The solution is not flowing through your intestines. And he said, this is extremely serious. I was very frightened, but I was determined to find out what was wrong.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
Over the past 3 years, Kathy McFadden has been suffering from crippling pains in her legs. While her doctors are certain it's a result of poor circulation, she isn't so sure, especially when a frightening rash begins to spread down both legs.
I would wake up, bloody sheets, oozy sheets, sticky sheets. Legs were a mess. It was horrible. So I made an appointment with a dermatologist. He looked at my legs and he told me I had stasis dermatitis.
Stasis dermatitis is a blistering skin condition that develops in areas of the body with insufficient blood flow and fluid buildup.
I had medication for the stasis dermatitis. He prescribed a cream for the rash. It just didn't work. I still had to wear the compression stockings. That was really hard. Very often, my legs would bleed and ooze. The stocking then would become stuck to my skin. The dermatologist recommended a complete change of medication. And on my next visit, I hadn't improved.
Desperate for relief, Kathy tries one doctor after another, but to no avail. And along with her rash, the agonizing leg pains and swelling continue. She gradually finds herself increasingly debilitated.
I started to think to myself, what is going on? My legs were a mess. I was really feeling depressed. I was struggling to understand why I should have all these things going wrong.
It was difficult for her, especially since she wasn't getting any better.
Then, mysteriously, Kathy begins to drop a few pounds. At first, she's pleased, but not for long.
I started losing weight rather rapidly. It was small increments, but then it became pretty dramatic.
During about a 3-year period, Kathy gradually went from being a very robust 150, 155 pounds to maybe 120. And then she went to 115. And she went to 110. And she went to 105. To the point that eventually she, at her lowest point, weighed 95 pounds, and she was just a skeleton.
She looked white as a ghost. I mean, she was just skin and bones.
I just felt, all of a sudden, very weak. I was tired, too. That's when it became a concern. My primary care did some blood tests. The doctor said that the blood tests that she gave me indicated that I had diabetes. And I asked her what that meant. And she said it was my glucose level that determined that I had diabetes.
Your pancreas does not put out sufficient insulin so that your blood sugar level, your glucose, gets too high.
The McFaddens are also surprised to hear the doctor say that Kathy's dramatic weight loss is an effect of the disease.
I couldn't understand it. I didn't believe that I could have diabetes.
Unconvinced, Kathy consults another round of specialists, but the diagnosis remains the same. And gradually, as none of her symptoms improve despite Kathy's best efforts to manage them, the McFaddens begin to suspect that the doctors are missing something important.
It appeared to me and to Kathy that these symptoms must in some way be related.
They wouldn't make a connection between all the symptoms.
And over time, they begin taking an immense toll on her.
I felt overwhelmingly fatigued. And at that point, I was taking naps after school. And then also going to bed very early at night.
My mom would call out of work to go see a doctor 2-3 times a week.
She realized that she had to retire. And this was an extremely difficult decision for her.
On January 1st, 2007, Kathy goes to work for the last time. But it's not a retirement she can enjoy.
A lot of my days were spent on the sofa. Bernard took on a lot of extra responsibilities, like the laundry, cooking.
She really became much more reclusive. It was difficult for her to get up and walk more than a few steps.
I had gotten so thin and so bony that I had to carry a pillow with me when I sat down anywhere because it hurt. My bones were all that was left of me.
At this point, I remember my sister saying, you know, our mother is dying. But honestly, I felt like she'd already died. Because she just wasn't the person that she used to be anymore.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
Over the past 8 months, Samantha Mina has been losing weight at an extremely dangerous pace. Eating more than 3 bites of food makes her projectile vomit, and no doctor can tell her why. But now, Dr. Ziad Haddad has uncovered a lead during an upper gastrointestinal exam.
The contrast could not really progress past the third portion of her duodenum.
The duodenum is the first section of the small intestine, where most digestion takes place.
After the completion of the upper GI series, in conjunction with her history, the diagnosis was pretty clear. I was confident that the diagnosis was superior mesenteric artery syndrome.
Superior mesenteric artery syndrome is a rare condition involving the digestive system and arteries. In healthy individuals, the duodenum, located at the top of the small intestine, runs between 2 branches of the superior mesenteric artery, or SMA. But in patients like Samantha, the duodenum becomes pinched between the 2 blood vessels, making it impossible to digest food.
In healthy individuals, as the duodenum passes underneath the SMA, the angle is wide enough for the flow of food. As that angle becomes more and more narrow, it starts to compress the duodenum. So think of the angle as an upside down V, or almost like a nutcracker. As the angle becomes more and more acute, it compresses the duodenum more and more.
I definitely couldn't believe it. There's an artery cutting across my small intestines, preventing me from eating. I wanted to shout from the rooftops, like, we found what's wrong with me. I don't have an eating disorder. I'm not anorexic.
However, Dr. Haddad suspects Samantha's small frame probably set the stage for the disorder.
I'm not sure what the tipping point for Samantha was, but that weight loss then exacerbated what was already probably a narrow angle for her SMA. Once that angle narrowed beyond a certain threshold, then the obstruction began, and then her downward spiral began. Your digestive tract is just like any other plumbing. When there's an obstruction, things back up. Vomiting is almost like a protective mechanism to decompress those structures. So she was vomiting, she wasn't getting enough nutrition, and thus she's had weight loss. Had Samantha never been diagnosed and never been treated, she would have continued to lose weight, and that would have been a life-threatening condition.
After I was diagnosed, I was extremely relieved. I was just thrilled, and so was my mom. Everything fell into place. I wanted to know what to do.
The treatment is a surgical procedure where you're basically reconfiguring the bowel, the small intestine, in order to divert the flow around the obstruction, such that food is not going underneath the SMA anymore, it's going around it.
But the surgery is risky. Samantha is so underweight, heart failure is a real possibility.
My worst fear when Samantha was going to surgery is that she is very, very thin, and it might be too much for her to handle. So it was scary to know that she might not come out of it.
And there are other serious complications that Samia and Samantha must face.
The surgeon explained to me that there is a possibility that the superior mesenteric artery would be severed, and that would cause hemorrhaging. This is a major artery that branches right out of the aorta, which stems straight from the heart. So to hear that from just nicking that artery, I would bleed to death, was terrifying. I remember just crying, saying, is there any other way? Is there anything else that can be done besides surgery? He said, I'm sorry, no. If you do not have this surgery, you will die. I decided that despite all the risks involved with a surgery like this, that I would go through with it. My surgery was scheduled for 3:30 p.m. on January 31st, 2008. I just felt like, let's do this. I'm ready to have my life back.
Finally, Samantha is wheeled into surgery.
It was a long wait. I've been through a lot in my life, but that was the worst experience I ever had.
After 8 long hours, the operation is complete.
I remember waking up in the anesthesia recovery room, and I saw the surgeon there, and he said, everything went according to plan, everything is fine. I felt relieved. I was told I had to take at least 1 semester off, but I needed a year to recover from SMA syndrome as a whole. I was put into physical therapy because I had lost a lot of my muscle mass from all the weight loss and the malnutrition.
She still had to be on some liquid diet and then soft diet, and then little by little introducing the solid food. So it was like a mother who is feeding a baby. Every day was an improvement for Samantha, and that was exciting.
I remember standing on the scale at a post-op appointment and seeing that scale read 85, and that was the most beautiful number to my eyes. I was just thrilled, and so was my mom.
As Samantha begins to recover, she can't help but wonder why not one of the many experts she consulted was able to recognize her condition.
SMA syndrome is a rare disease. The diagnosis of SMA syndrome is hard to make on a clinical basis alone because the symptoms associated with it are fairly nonspecific.
I was just so happy to be on the road.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
For more than a decade, 62-year-old Kathy McFadden has endured a bewildering constellation of symptoms. Swollen, painful legs, a blistering rash, diabetes, constant fatigue, and severe weight loss. Now, after wasting away to a frightening skeletal 95 pounds, she's set on making one last-ditch effort to find out what's turned her life upside down. Once again, she's checking in with her general practitioner.
I knew something very serious was going on, and it frightened me, and I didn't know what to do. My greatest fear was that I could die.
Having exhausted all other options, the doctor sends Kathy to a local hospital for a full-body CAT scan. And when the findings come in, she's completely taken aback. There's a mass the size of a baseball growing in her abdomen.
I was shocked. The technician who took the CAT scan thought they saw something on the tail of my pancreas.
The medical team isn't sure what the growth is, but the McFaddens fear the worst.
This was devastating, so I was very, very, very upset, to say the least.
Wasting no time, Bernard and Kathy make an appointment at Thomas Jefferson Hospital with Dr. Eugene Kennedy, a leading pancreatic surgeon.
When I met Kathy, I was surprised because she's actually a young and vibrant woman, and she appeared quite old and frail. I thought she was dying. The first thing that stuck out at us was the size of this large mass in the pancreas. It was 8 centimeters.
Dr. Kennedy said that with a blood test, we'd be able to make a confirmation of just what type of problem this is. We had to wait. It was at least 3 weeks, and I felt that the wait was interminable.
In mid-March, the findings are finally in.
Based on the results of the blood test and the CAT scan of her abdomen, we confirmed that Kathy had a glucagonoma.
A glucagonoma is an extremely rare tumor that grows on the pancreas. In a healthy individual, the pancreas secretes the hormone glucagon to help maintain blood sugar levels. But in patients like Kathy, for unknown reasons, the tumor constantly secretes glucagon regardless of blood sugar amounts, wreaking havoc on almost every system.
The function of glucagon is to raise your blood sugar when you haven't eaten, by releasing sugar that's stored in your liver and by breaking down muscle in your body to form sugar. When the pancreas starts to form a hormone-producing tumor, the tumor doesn't pay attention to any of the other signals in the body, so it just grows and makes its hormone without any regulation.
I was so relieved. We'd been searching for an answer for 15 years, I really was ecstatic.
With each passing year, the tumor set off each and every symptom Kathy experienced. The first signs, her aching legs and swollen ankles, were the result of her body turning the protein in her muscles into sugar.
The glucagon causing her to break down the proteins resulted in her lower extremity swelling and aches and pains. If the protein in your bloodstream gets low, you get excess fluid and swelling in your body.
And her low protein levels most likely triggered Kathy's next symptom, the horrific rash.
One theory is that the breakdown of protein due to the glucagon lowers the level of some of the essential proteins and amino acids that are needed in the body to keep a healthy skin intact.
And it was only a matter of time before Kathy's body began to react systemically to the glucagon, triggering her weight loss and diabetes.
The glucagon made her body think she was starving. So as a result, she started to break down her own body's muscle tissue to elevate her blood sugar so that her body continued to function. Kathy developed diabetes because the blood sugar was high, as if she wasn't making enough insulin. If left untreated, Kathy would have continued to get weaker and weaker, lost weight, and become more debilitated. And the more debilitated she became, the more opportunity for other problems, other infections, and other issues of chronic disease to set in. And any of those problems could have resulted in her death.
The harsh truth is undeniable. Kathy's life is on the line, and surgery is the only way to stop the disease.
There's no cut and dried way to say whether one of these hormone-producing tumors is a cancerous tumor that could eventually spread to the liver, or if it's a benign tumor that would have not spread anywhere. The worst case scenario I prepared Kathy and her family for was finding spots of tumor that had spread. The treatment would be to examine her abdomen for any signs of tumor, remove anything we could find, and then follow her thereon.
Whatever you hear about pancreatic cancer, you always think terminal.
I think that this was the first time it truly occurred to me that whatever it was that she had could kill her.
So right before they put me under, I told Bernard, I love you, and I'm going to be okay.
The wait is excruciating. But 4 long hours later, Dr. Kennedy finally emerges from the OR.
The results of the surgery were great for Kathy. There was no evidence that the tumor had spread anywhere, so we were able to remove the tumor in its entirety.
We were just overjoyed.
From the time her tumor was removed, she started to get better. There was no additional treatment.
And less than a month after the surgery, Dr. Kennedy has more good news for Kathy.
Her diabetes had disappeared as well, so every single symptom that she had had was gone. 4 years before she was diagnosed, it was very, very disappointing and discouraging that they simply could come up with no leads whatsoever.
Bernard and I couldn't help wondering what took so long to find a diagnosis.
What's difficult is taking all of these seemingly unrelated symptoms and putting them into a single diagnosis. I've actually never seen someone with a glucagonoma before. They're quite rare tumors. There's several hundred cases reported in the medical literature. However, many of them don't have the severe symptoms that she did.